Hitler survived somewhere around 42 assassination attempts. But what would have happened if he hadn't? Who would have succeeded Hitler, and who would have succeeded him? Well, it turns out Hitler did, in fact, have a succession plan.
Should something happen to me in this struggle, then my immediate successor shall be Party Comrade Göring. Should anything happen to Party Comrade Göring, then his successor shall be Party Comrade Hess. You shall owe this man, as your Führer, the same loyalty and blind obedience you owe to my person. Should anything happen to Party Comrade Hess, then through the offices of law I shall call upon the Senate, which is to determine the most worthy, i.e. the most valiant, from its midst.
So, there you go. What? A Senate? I definitely read that correctly, didn't I? Yes, a Senate. What Senate? Since when did the Third Reich have a Senate?
The coming Senate is to be composed of about 60 people, not just office holders but also bearers of honours, not all Gauleiters and certainly not all Reichsleiters, a body of old, tried and trusted National Socialists. Frick's suggestion with its 300 names is rejected completely. The Führer reckons that he should be happy enough to get into it himself.
Okay, so this Senate is going to elect a new leader. So what? It wasn't like the Third Reich was a republic or anything.
As regards the government of Germany, I've come to the following conclusions. 1. The Reich must be a republic, having at its head an elected chief who shall be endowed with an absolute authority. 2. As a collective, there has to be a parliament, which has to support the leader and, if necessary, intervene in the leadership of the state. 3. The election of this leader was not to be conducted by this parliament, but by the Senate.
So wait. The Third Reich was going to be a republic with a Senate, but also have a parliament? Like, what? Does this mean that Hitler wanted a parliamentary system like we have here in the UK?
The term democracy has been usurped by the parliamentarians, and they claim for themselves that parliamentarism is identified with democracy. But in pure parliamentarism, I can neither see the right form, not in parliamentarians the right men, to truly represent and govern a nation. The true self-administration of a nation, which for me is the deepest sense of democracy, can certainly not be achieved by way of pure parliamentarism, but only by way of an organisation of self-administration in which the best and the most capable must rise to the top.
Well, this confirms that the UK isn't a democracy because the best and most capable certainly haven't risen to the top. But okay, this quote from Hitler might state the difference between parliamentary democracy and regular democracy, but that doesn't mean Hitler was pro-democracy. Hitler couldn't have been pro-democracy.
If today a communist turns to me and says, "You are against democracy, against the rule of the people." No, I am not against the rule of the people. I am only against the rule of the elite of the stupidity of a nation, that is all. Because I object that the representation of a nation should only be found in its stupidity, and profess my belief that the only true representation of a nation lies in genius, in its daring, in the superior reason. Put the best of a nation at its head and subject the people to their rule. As long as one gives oneself over to the mob, it is not the people who rule but the froth, not that rules which sinks to the bottom because of its value, but that which because of its lack of value swims on top and noisily forms bubbles there. This is the only declaration against democracy which has any justification.
That's right, people. Hitler was pro-democracy. He was for the rule of the people. Demus Kratus, people rule. In fact, just like many other politicians throughout history, Hitler claims he was exporting democracy to other countries.
It was only then that I applied the force of our great German folk to restore democracy to these countries, in other words, to liberate these oppressed people.
Okay, he may have said this, but he didn't create a democracy. He implemented a military dictatorship.
One of these accomplishments of National Socialism is above all the formation of a leadership of the folk and state that is as far removed from parliamentary democracy as it is from a military dictatorship. In National Socialism, the Volk has been given the leadership which, as a party, has not only mobilised but also organised the nation, and organised it such that the supremely natural principle of selection would appear to indicate that the continued existence of a secure political leadership is guaranteed.
I mean, this is technically true. The German military, the Wehrmacht, wasn't in power, and Hitler did everything he could to stop it from taking power. Instead of a military dictatorship, he had a party dictatorship, so Hitler is technically correct here. Okay, but the party dictatorship isn't the same as the people in power, right? You can't have a dictatorship of the people and call that a democracy, can you?
The thesis of the identity of democracy and dictatorship by the people is, as we know, also one of the fundamental theorems of Leninism and Stalinism. Lenin, Stalin and Mao Zedong all claimed that the dictatorship of the proletariat, which was realised by the rule of the proletarian party, was in reality a higher form of democracy than bourgeois parliamentarism. Theoretically, this is correct. A state is defined as a nation or territory considered as an organised political community under one government.
Therefore, the National Socialist German Workers' Party was the politically organised community. It was the government. It was the state. And since the party consisted of German workers, it was also a proletarian party, much like the Bolshevik Party in the Soviet Union. So it was a dictatorship of the proletariat, a people's state, a democratic dictatorship. Because throughout Mein Kampf, Hitler calls for a people's state, a democracy. Because democracy is demos kratos, people rule, or a people's state, and as I've shown previously, the people are the public and the public is the state. The public sector is the state, so democracy is state rule. That's why North Korea is a democracy, because the state is in power. That's why Gentile, the philosophical founder of fascism, also claimed that fascism was the highest form of democracy.
But this state that realises itself in the consciousness and will of the individual, rather than being imposed from on high, cannot have the same relationship with the people imagined by nationalism. The nationalist state was an aristocratic state that constructed itself out of the force it inherited from its origin that made it valued by the masses. The fascist state, on the other hand, is a popular state, and in that sense a democratic state par excellence. Here are more quotes confirming this concept. Every citizen shares a relationship with the state that is so intimate that the state exists only insofar as it is made to exist by the citizen. Thus, its formation is a product of the consciousness of each individual, and thus of the masses, in which the power of the state consists. We have seen above that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of ruling class, to win the battle of democracy. It will be the task of the people's state to make the race the centre of the life of the community.
And we should have absolutely no embarrassment about saying that we are a people's government. And this is a people's cabinet. And we are going to be working to deliver on the priorities of the British people.
By enslaving them within their homes, taking away their jobs and rights, making their children go hungry, and impoverishing them through taxation, inflation, and debt slavery. But going back to this quote from Gentile for a moment, the idea he's presenting here is that the state is created from the individuals within it. Then what he and Hitler and other fascists and socialists do is go beyond that and say that the state is therefore the embodiment of the people, body, corpse, corporation, the organ of the state. And thus, they say, the state, or the collective, is superior to the individual. The individual must therefore bow down to the state. The people is the body of the state, and the state is the spirit of the people. In the fascist concept, the people is the state, and the state is the people. The tools with which the ideator is achieved in the state are the party and the corporation. Or, in other words, everything in the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. They also say that this collective state is an organism, that it has a personality, that it has a consciousness, and because of this, what they then say is that the individual is not imposed upon by the state. Rather, they say, the state frees the individual to do more than they could do if they were left to their own devices. Liberty is found only in the state, and the state is authority. The ethical conception of the state as an autonomous personality that has its own value and its own ends, subordinating to itself every existence and individual interest, not to suffocate them, but to reorganize them, only as realizations of the personality of the state as conscious and as will. Well, this concept is fundamentally flawed. This is the problem at the heart of all collectivist ideologies, be it fascism, socialism, syndicalism, Nazism. And the flaw is this: a collective isn't a physical body, it has no consciousness. It is merely a bunch of individuals acting individually, and can be nothing other than a bunch of individuals acting individually. There is no collective. The collective is a social construct. We must realise that all actions are performed by individuals. A collective operates always through the intermediary of one or several individuals whose actions are related to the collective as the secondary source. We can see a crowd, i.e. a multitude of people. Whether this crowd is a mere gathering or a mass, in the sense in which this term is used in contemporary psychology, or an organised body, or any other kind of social entity, is a question which can only be answered by understanding the meaning which they themselves attach to their presence. And this meaning is always the meaning of individuals. Not our senses, but understanding, a mental process, makes us recognise social entities. A state is not a body, it is a collection of individuals who are organised politically, and, just to clarify, those individuals are public individuals, not private individuals. They are part of the public sector and thus are public, and it doesn't matter who you elect or who gets selected, they're all the same. As Gentile and Hitler and many others have made clear, their job is to rule over you, to have power over you, and as Hitler said, they see you as the mob. Something that needs to be controlled. This is why voting and/or democracy is just as bad as any other form of government. The power goes out of your hands and into the hands of others who then control you.
What's that? You think voting is democracy? No. Democracy and voting are two separate concepts. Democracy is simply the people, the state, in power. It doesn't require voting. This is where you've been tricked. And of course, voting is bad. Socrates was murdered by a vote, and if everyone votes to murder the Jews, like they did in Germany, Hitler was elected after all, then the principle of voting would lead to the murder of Jews, which is why the Jews were happy that Corbyn didn't get elected, even though the anti-Semite got a lot of votes. Just because a lot of people vote for something doesn't mean they made a good decision, clearly. Now, I do need to clarify that while Hitler was pro-democracy, he was also against false democracies. We've already heard his views on parliamentarianism and of mob-rule democracy. But he was also against social democracy, which at times he called international democracy.
Had then, in 1918, a certain Adolf Hitler, instead of serving as a German musketeer, been German Reich Chancellor, do you really believe that then the false gods of capitalism and international democracy would have carried the victory?
This is why he was against the Weimar Republic, not because it was a republic or a democracy, but because it was a bad version of democracy.
We National Socialists would not fight against this republic if it were simultaneously the German Reich. We fight against this republic because this republic proved incapable of again filling the Germans with pride at being a German. We would not fight against the outer form if the content were worthy of the German people.
So he wasn't against the principles of social democracy, he was only against the Social Democratic Party and other similar parties. And the reason why is because he thought social democracy was a mask, which was hiding the true intentions of those supposedly behind it.
Accordingly, I had no feeling of antipathy towards the actual policy of the Social Democrats, that its avowed purpose was to raise the level of the working class, which in my ignorance I then foolishly believed was a further reason why I should speak in favour of social democracy rather than against it. And so, at the age of 17, the word Marxism was very little known to me, while I looked on social democracy and socialism as synonymous expressions. It was only as the result of a sudden blow from the rough hand of fate that my eyes were opened to the nature of the unparalleled system of duping the public. Hitherto, my acquaintance with the Social Democratic Party was only that of a mere spectator at some of their mass meetings. I had not the slightest idea of the Social Democratic teaching or the mentality of its partisans. All of a sudden I was brought face to face with the products of their teaching and what they called their Weltanschauung worldview. In this way, a few months sufficed for me to learn something which under other circumstances might have necessitated decades of study, namely that under the cloak of social virtue and love of one's neighbour, a veritable pestilence, yes, he's talking about the Jews, was spreading abroad, and that if this pestilence be not stamped out of the world without delay, it may eventually succeed in exterminating the human race.
Hitler wasn't so much against the policies of social democracy, but he was against it nonetheless because he believed it served the agenda of the Jews, whom he thought were trying to take over the world and destroy civilization. I've been over Hitler's racial theory of history in other videos, so I won't repeat that here.
One fact became quite evident to me. It was that this alien race held in its hands the leadership of that Social Democratic Party with whose minor representatives I had been disputing for months.
This is also confirmed in his speeches.
The Jewish democracy of the West will sooner or later lead to Bolshevism.
Therefore, Hitler can absolutely be pro-democracy on the one hand, but anti-false democracies on the other, what he would claim to be Jewish democracy. This is why he makes seemingly contradictory statements in Mein Kampf or in his speeches, because when he says democracy, he's generally referring to the bad kinds of democracy, rather than the people's state democracy that he's advocating for. He makes this distinction here.
After all, behind this front, there stands today a worthy German homeland. I now want to say my thanks to this folk. This appeal also represented a vote. While the others talk of democracy, this is real democracy.
So yes, Hitler was pro-democracy, was calling for the Third Reich to be turned into a republic with a Senate and a parliament, and he called it a people's state, a democracy. But don't worry, I'm sure our democratic leaders won't enslave us in a regime of unjust laws, taxation, inflation and debt like Hitler did. After all, history definitely doesn't repeat itself just because you won't learn from it. So, stay inside, build back better Bolshevism, save lives. Thanks for watching, bye for now.